Welcome and good evening to all of you tuning in across the country and even other parts of the world for an incredibly special evening at the 2021 Night of Celebration of Generosity. My name is LaDonna Jingla.
And I'm Nick Brandt. We are so overjoyed that we get to journey with you tonight. Thank you for having us in your homes and for watching with us. LaDonna, I cannot believe that it's actually here.
I know, it's finally here.
We've been waiting for months to get together with you and to be able to bring such a special night to you.
Yes, and thousands of you are tuning in and joining us from your living rooms, homes, watch parties, on your cell phones, and hopefully with many close friends and family gathered around. We are so thrilled to get to share this next hour with you.
I love it. Tonight is going to be extraordinary. And while we are sad, let's just admit it, let's get it out there. We're sad that we're not at the Broadmoor right now.
Yes, I am still lamenting this.
I know, we're sad, but we do have a lot of things to be hopeful about and grateful for. And one of those is next year, we will be back together in person in Orlando, Florida for
the
Celebration of Generosity 2022. It's going to be phenomenal.
It is. And secondly, tonight, more people than ever before are experiencing this life-giving message. We are more hopeful than ever of seeing God's generosity displayed through the generosity of his people. May God accelerate his movement of generosity at a time when we need his presence all the more.
That's right. And our team has really prepared for a very special night. We've worked hard for this broadcast, really with the hope to really reflect the heart and the feel of what a celebration of generosity is really about every year. You're going to get a little taste and a feel of what these nights and these evenings and these weekends are about and be able to see and hear some remarkable stories, beautiful stories, stories of what we like to call irrational generosity.
In addition to that, we hope you're with friends and family as you watch, and that tonight stirs invaluable, meaningful conversation.
That's what it's all about.
It is how it all began.
I love it.
We are so encouraged that many of you have been journeying along with us for so long, and you've opened your homes to let people in for a watch party.
Yeah, tonight watch parties are taking place all over the country, taking place even in parts of the world. Here's just a few people who are watching and tuning in and opening their homes tonight.
Yes, so Evan and Julia Carter, hello in Atlanta.
Love it.
Our dear friend, Kate Gardner. Kate, thank you for tuning in with us. Maria Matthews and her crew here in Chattanooga. And Christy Wilson, our dear friend at Generous Giving. Now here's some of my favorites. Tom and Mary Vandegooch, they've been with us for a while. And then also Carrie Williams. Thank you so much for joining in.
I love it. And so many of these people are hosting tonight because there's a message that we're going to share a little bit about tonight that's deeply impacted them.
Yes.
And we're hoping and praying for those of you who are tuning in for the first time and those who are tuning in again and have been part of Generous Giving, that this deeply impacts you again once more.
Yes, simply put, tonight we hope to love, serve, inspire, maybe even challenge you as you digest these remarkable stories.
Yeah, and the good news is there's still time to invite people in. So if you want to invite somebody, if you're watching this in the Central or Eastern time zone at 7 p.m. Pacific, we're going to re-air this broadcast. And then if you miss it just in general today, or you know somebody who couldn't make it tonight, all of this content will be live and on demand for you to watch and reshare tomorrow on our website at generousgiving.org.
We know that tonight many of you are joining a Generous Giving event for the first time ever. Welcome. We are so thrilled to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for trusting us, and thank you to whoever invited you in. We're confident you are not going to regret the journey tonight.
Whether you're new to Generous Giving or you've been a friend for a while, before we begin our journey this evening, we want you to hear about our heart, hope, and mission. So check out this quick story for a little glimpse into where we're headed this next hour.
In the late 90s, a few of us got together to talk about something that concerned us. Wealth was reaching record highs, but generosity was lower than it had been during the Great Depression. It didn't make any sense. Now, around that same time, we met some people who lived very generous lives, and we asked them, "Why are you so generous?" Their passion and convictions inspired us, and we found something else. Just talking with others about generosity opened our hearts so God could grow us. So we began to create events for people to come together and simply discuss generosity. And it was then that something remarkable happened.
It became really clear that this whole thing wasn't just going to be a season of trying out this crazy giving. It had to be our new way of life.
One of my mentors always said, you can't fool kids and puppies. And I'm telling you, this message, you can't fool kids and puppies. It's the real deal.
I wasn't sure how much I had been given. I thought that I was a generous person. Yes, there was conviction, but also there was freedom. And I realized that this was a new path for me. This experience for me was an epiphany about what the abundant life is really all about.
And from that point on, we knew generous giving would always be about a conversation. But many of our friends were skeptical, worried that these conversations were actually just a sneaky way for us to ask them for money.
I was interested in the idea of generosity, but I was pretty skeptical at first. I wasn't sure if this would be a program where I would be guilted into giving money to some random organization I didn't know about. I quickly realized that wasn't the case. I would define it as a safe space for people to really meditate on the biblical message of generosity. And it was at this first jog where I confronted my very contradictory relationship with money. And for me, my identity was rooted in the things I owned and what I looked like. I realized that all the things that I thought I had earned for myself were actually a gift from God, including the career I had worked so hard for.
It's more important what you become than what you achieve. And the big question is, what are you going to become in pursuit of what you want? And generous giving, if you're around these people, it will change what you become.
What else would he withhold from us? We are co-heirs with Jesus. And that's one thing to be a theology, but when that has made its way into the fiber of your being, it makes you realize another status, another car, another symbol, it does nothing to me. I have every spiritual blessing in Christ. I think he simply waits to find a people who say, yes, I am in.
I love how that video captures our 20-year history of creating space for meaningful conversations. You know, it's been nearly a year since we transitioned a new leader at Generous Giving. And tonight I have the privilege of introducing him to all of you. His name's Troy Busmeyer. And it's been a blast in the past year to co-labor together. And it's a privilege for me to serve under your leadership.
Wow, thanks, Todd. That's humbling, and I am just so thrilled and delighted to be a part of the team and welcome so many friends to this evening's experience. Whether you've been walking in this conversation with us for a while or this is your very first event, I hope it will impact you the same way it did me more than 10 years ago at a journey of generosity. You know, I was climbing the corporate ladder, pursuing more and getting it. And yes, I was claiming the power of Christ in my life, but honestly wanting to control and direct the outcomes. It was really the stories of generous giving that helped me realize that true flourishing comes from yielding control to Him over finances, career, reputation, influence, everything. It is truly a privilege to be with all of you this evening and in the years to come as we continue to carry the message of God's great generosity.
Well, we're expectant about tonight and what God's gonna do. And really the best part of my role over the last 20 years has been becoming friends with remarkable people and then getting to share their stories with you. I'm really excited about introducing you tonight to Beverly Grant. And I think her story will touch your heart as you hear how God has worked in and through her life. Today, I'm very excited to get to introduce you all to my friend, Beverly Grant.
Hi, Todd. Thank you so much. And I do hope that as we chat today, that my desire to be a surrendered, Christ-following giver will come through.
So maybe we could just start with your upbringing. Give me a little context for how it all began for you.
I grew up in a very, what I didn't know then, but I do know now, poor environment. My parents had me late in life. I was their 10th child. I ended up graduating from high school, having the opportunity to go off to college, and that fundamentally, I think, changed my life.
Well, take us to college, and I think there was a woman that was instrumental in kind of your spiritual formation.
Absolutely.
And that begins to build on this thread of generosity in your life.
The woman that I had the blessing and opportunity to sit under, Barbara Allen, she talked to me about what it meant to have a personal relationship with Jesus. She also talked to me about everything being God's. You know, the early experience with my mom being so generous to our neighbors and to the balance of our family. And then my relationship with Barbara and my, learning under Barbara and Bill really put me on the path of understanding what giving was in a biblical sense. I was always interested in growing, learning, and developing. And I heard this message from Dr. Tony Evans on needs, wants, and desires. And I thought that's a good way to live your life, to live in the needs camp, right? Because that's where the will of God is, providing my needs. And so that was a life-altering, I would say a defining moment for me, just in my overall financial life.
At some point here, you go back to school to get your MBA.
Mm-hmm. And when I graduated from that, I had a choice of two jobs. I had IBM or Procter & Gamble.
You ultimately ended up running a division that had over $8 billion in sales, over 1,200 employees. As your income is rising, how some of these principles of needs, wants, desires, like how are you living that out in your journey?
I had a woman call me in to have a conversation to me about some things that she thought I would benefit from. One of them was a makeover. I thought I looked fine. I wore nice clothes and all that. And so she talked to me about like changing out my wardrobe. And so I asked her about the outfit that she had on. It was, I think roughly she told me $2,100 to $2,400 for just the outfit, not shoes, not her handbag, just this outfit she had on. And I remember saying to her, I don't believe all of the clothes that I own cost $2,400. It was just something I chose not to invest in. It wasn't important to me. What was more important to me was to give to things that I felt called to, that I felt the Lord leading me to. I wanted to have freedom and not be tied to things, not to have my identity tied to things. And some of it, I think, and if I'm being fully transparent, is the legalistic way I grew up in the faith too, about denying self. When I think about the ability to have impact on a life versus how, some outfit I'm gonna have, looking in the mirror, one is for eternity and the other one is not. I wanna be in a place where when I think about it, I can say the impact I wish that someone had on my life, I'm making that impact on someone else's life because I'm giving to the things of God.
So tell me a little bit about this 90-10. Elaborate on what you mean by that.
You think about when people tell you to invest in your IRA, well, you should put like 10% in there. For people who are really serious about their retirement, they're putting in more than 10%. So should I be more more disciplined around trying to retire? Should I be more disciplined about growing things in the kingdom? I think kingdom growth is a lot more important than retirement growth if I believe that God will meet all of my needs.
Yeah, we talk about at Generous Giving, people always ask about the tithe. And I always say, I don't want to talk about the 10%.
Right, no.
I want to talk about the 100%.
Right,
If
exactly.
it's all God's, then everything we do with what God's given us matters.
Yep.
So tell us about a call you got from your accountant a couple of years ago in which he was
a little concerned. It was probably 2018 maybe. I had submitted my taxes and my estimate information in November. And he called me and said, Beverly, I think we have a problem. You've given away more money this year than you've actually made. And so I said, and why is that a problem? He was like, well, it's not going to be like justifiable that you've given more than you've made. The thought that came in my mind is that in my last years, not only do I want to be a joyful giver, but I want to be ambitious in my generosity. I want to do more than I can even imagine that I could do. There is so much freedom for me in not being shackled by things. I have more money than I'll spend before I die. And so I fundamentally believe, because I do have a level of freedom. Am I 100% free? No. but I have a level of freedom in giving that the Lord has multiplied for me. It's hard for the Lord to put something in an enclosed hand. So as I'm giving with open hands, he can put more in my hands for me.
Wow, what a story.
She is incredible.
She's amazing.
She is. You know what stands out to me from Beverly's story is how much she believes God will meet her needs.
Yeah.
When she said, if I believe.
If I believe, that was what she said.
Yes, and it shows up in my actions. So the real question is, do I trust God? And how does that show up in my life? So thank you, Beverly.
Yeah, thanks, Beverly. I want to sit down with you, Beverly, and have more of a conversation. I want to hear more of it. But the good news is our team has recorded more of this story. So if you would like to see more of that conversation, just text Beverly to the number that you see on your screen, and we're happy to send a link to you to see more.
Though many of us don't feel rich, there is a statistic that came out years ago that was really awakening for me. It's that people who make $100,000 a year are in the top 1% of income earners in the world.
Wow.
There's a scripture that commands those who are rich in this present world to be generous. You know, I cannot excuse myself from that conversation.
Yeah.
I have to tune in.
Yeah, we all do. We have to all be awakened to the things of God and be part of this conversation. Each year, Celebration of Generosity is so privileged to invite several keynote speakers into our stage, and tonight is no different. World-class speakers and conversationalists. We're thrilled to introduce to you our first keynote of this evening. This special guest is no stranger to hosting conversations on generosity and the teaching of this subject. Pastor Craig Groeschel is a dynamic teacher of God's Word, and he brings a provocative challenge to you and me tonight, all of us who are richer than we think we are.
It is our joy to welcome Pastor Craig Groeschel to the Generous Giving stage this evening.
Hey, I'm Craig Groeschel, the pastor of Life Church, and it is a real honor and a privilege to talk to the celebration of generosity. If there's any way that we can honor God, it's when we are like God. And one of the best ways that we're like God is to do what God is known for. God is a giver. He loved the world. He gave his one and only son, and some have said that we're never more like God than when we're giving. And so it's with a humble spirit and also an excited spirit. I'm excited to talk to you today about generosity. And I've got some good news and bad news for you. I would ask you to vote if I were there, which you want to hear first, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the good news. And the good news is this, I hope you feel it. It is incredibly good news, and the good news is that you are ridiculously blessed, you are rich beyond measure, and so am I. The bad news is, according to my friend Andy Stanley, who taught on this, is that you're rich. The good news is you're rich, and the bad news is you're rich because it's not easy to be great at being rich. It's an incredibly difficult challenge to really be good at managing what God has entrusted to you. And you know this because you feel the weight of it. It's an awesome responsibility. The weight of success, everyone says, I want to be successful. Like, you don't know how difficult it is to oversee so many people, to have so many responsibilities, and then to take what you've accomplished and to steward it in a God-honoring way is really, really difficult. And we really only have three options with what to do with the blessings in our life. And I want to talk to you about the three different types of lives that we can live briefly. And the first one is, unfortunately, some people are going to live a life of pride. When they're successful, when they're blessed, when they're rich, they'll think it's all about them, and they'll be very, very proud. In fact, Jesus talked to some so-called believers in Laodicea. It's recorded in Revelation chapter 3:17, and he said to them, you say, I'm rich, and I've acquired great wealth, and I don't need a thing. In other words, you're rich and you're proud of it. But he said, you don't realize that you're wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. He was talking to a group of people and said, you think you did it all? You think it's all about you? You don't realize you're missing out on the most important things in life. And unfortunately, that's where so many people live today, is a life of pride. Look what I've done. Look what I've built. Look what I've accomplished. We have to remember who gave us the gifts, who gave us life, who gave us the opportunities I have. It didn't come from us. It came from our Father who gives good gifts. The first option is we have a life of pride. The second option is we can live a life of shame. And unfortunately, I'm guessing that there are some of you at some level or another feel guilty for the blessings in your life. I know personally this has been something that I've battled with because I grew up in a home where people said oftentimes those rich people are bad. They cheat other people out. And there was kind of the implication, whether said out loud or just implied, that rich people are bad. And the truth of the matter is, I bought my first rent house at the age of 19. I owned 4 rent houses by the time I graduated from college, and I've been multiplying it ever since. And so I am blessed today, and there's a part of me that feels incredibly guilty and embarrassed by those blessings. A little bit like what you'll see in Genesis chapter 32 when Jacob said this, Lord, you said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I'll make you prosper. God said, I'll bless you. God said, God is the one who makes people prosper. I'll make you prosper. And he said, I'm unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you've shown your servant. I'm unworthy. I'm not deserving. I feel guilty. What's interesting, and if you feel this way, if you feel shame in your success, I would just ask you, what other area of blessing creates shame in your life? Where do you ever apologize? Like, oh yeah, I was just lucky and it's not that big a deal and I feel guilty, for my wealth or my success. If you're healthy and you take care of your body, you're eating right and you're exercising, would you ever make excuses? Oh no, it's just genetics. No, someone says you're in good shape, you say thank you. If you work really hard and you have a God-honoring marriage and people look on and say, I love the way you love Jesus together, you have a great marriage, you wouldn't say, oh no, we really hate each other secretly, oh, we're embarrassed. You would never say that, you'd never make excuses. If your kids grow up and they're serving God faithfully and in the church, they're making a big difference in the world and someone compliments your kids, you don't make excuses for them. And you don't feel ashamed. Why would you feel ashamed for doing what God called you to do, which was to be fruitful and multiply, to be a wise steward? You have some options in life. We all do. As you are rich, if you want to be good at being rich, you don't want to do it with a life of pride, and you certainly don't want to do it with a life of guilt and shame. Our third and our only other option is to live a life of irrational generosity. To live a life of irrational generosity as God has so faithfully blessed us, because the bottom line is we can't take credit for all of our success. We can't take credit for all of it. And we're not supposed to be ashamed. And so to be great at being rich, we want to become great at being generous. And I'll tell you a little bit of our generosity story as a church and personally. In the mid-2000s or so, Life Church started to grow, but we had grown also by borrowing, and we were at the peak of our debt. And when I tell you we had debt, we had the kind of debt that kept me awake every night. We were what I would call paycheck to paycheck. There were many times when we were afraid that we wouldn't be able to make payroll. There was a time I took out a home equity loan early in the church just to make payroll. And Pastor Bobby Grunwald came to me when we had all these resources, these sermons, and these videos that other churches started wanting to buy. And he said, would you like to sell those? And I said, we probably should. And he said, I had an idea that may have come from God. What if we didn't sell them, but what if we gave them away? Well, this was in the mid-2000s, and at that time, churches never did anything like that. And I was rocked by his question, because there was a big part of me that immediately knew it was the right thing to do. But for multiple reasons. One was, honestly, the pastor can take a percentage, and that didn't look like a bad plan to me. And secondly, if we gave it all away, I wasn't sure if our church could afford to do it. So I said, let me wrestle with it. Well, oddly enough, in God's providence, I happened to go on a mission trip about the same time, and I went into a home of a lady who had nothing. And when I say nothing, if you've never been to a place like this, you really should go to a place like this, shack with dirt floors and such. And she served me lunch and served me meat. I looked at everyone else there, including her plate, and no one else had any meat. And I said, why are you giving me meat? And she had heard from a sermon when I was joking around, because for a season, my wife Amy became like a vegetarian, and I joked around about, I want some meat. I can't find any meat. And she had heard that, and so she saved up for weeks and weeks and weeks. and gave me something that she hadn't had the personal luxury of in months in her life to bless me. And she wanted to bless and honor me with an irrational generosity of meat. I could barely sit outside of her shack knowing that I had had meat. And she who had nothing gave the person who had everything meat when she couldn't get it for herself. I came back and said to Bobby, absolutely and completely, we will give away our resources and trust God. And God is my witness, and we can verify this story over and over and over again. It's like the floodgates of heaven opened up the moment we made that decision. The next weekend, the offering without a single big gift was the biggest offering that we'd had for date. And within a very short season, we not only paid off all of our debt, but we increased our level of giving. We came out with a YouVersion Bible app. And as of to date, we've been able to put it on about 500 million devices completely free. We're a debt-free organization. In my own life, Amy and I now practice radical generosity, living way beneath our means, donating books and well over a tithe and anything impossible that we can to make a difference. What I love is God's word and what he calls us to do. The bottom line is we're successful and we're blessed, and to be good at it, we want to be a little bit like 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11. The context is that God loves a cheerful giver, and Scripture says this. The Apostle Paul said, yes, you will be enriched in every way. Why? So that you can always be generous. You will be enriched in every way. Why? Why are you rich? Why are you blessed? So that you can always be generous. And Scripture says this, and when you do, take your gifts to those who need them, and what are they going to do? They are going to thank God. The good news is that you're rich and so am I. You're blessed. The bad news is it takes real responsibility, real faith, real prayer, real dedication to be good at being rich. Why are we so blessed? Meaning you and meaning me. It's so that we can always be generous. And we know that you can't outgive God. There's no such thing as outgiving God. So let it become an identity. Generous isn't just something that we do, it's who we are. So, because God has blessed you, you can be full of pride, which I hope you aren't. I know you're not. You can be full of shame, which I hope you aren't. I hope you'll grow through that. Or we can be full of generosity. I don't know about you, but as for me, as for my household, as for our church, and I know it is for you, we will lead the way with irrational generosity because we truly believe it is more blessed to give than to receive.
I love how Pastor Craig ends that teaching. We will lead the way with our irrational generosity because we truly believe it is more blessed to give than to receive. Praying that we will always be that kind of generous. Well, we are so grateful this evening to have a special friend in the Generous Giving Studio for a very unique conversation. LaDonna, take it away.
Thanks, Nick. I'm sitting here with our friend, Adam Miller. Adam is the Global Generosity Coordinator from Young Life International. And I am so delighted to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so fun. Thank you.
I'm happy you're able to take time out of your day to be with us. Well, I have to say, I love many things about you. But one of my favorite recent facts about you is that while a lot of people were revving down as our world came to a pause, you saw an opportunity to really step in and share this message in an accelerated way as we transitioned to be online. And so I want to hear some of that. But first, I want to hear from you. What motivates you to keep sharing this story with others?
Well, my wife and I experienced our first jog 9 years ago, and it pressed us in some really hard ways. We were just encouraged, but also really challenged to think not about 10%, but about 100. We went to our first jog, Journey of Generosity, at a retreat center overnight with a bunch of friends, and we got to hear some really compelling truth about generosity, and it changed our lives in a lot of ways. And I got to take that back to clients in my financial planning practice, and I just watched our community, one jog turn into one story of adopting kids or getting rid of a business or quitting a job. And it wasn't all about money. It was just people giving their whole lives to Christ over and over and over. And to see that, the investment just made so much sense. It was so fun.
It is so fun. I'm with you. I love that we actually get to be on the front lines of seeing transformation happen in our lives and in our friends' lives. So tell me more about this past year, because you and your friends were able to see more than 50 jogs happen. So how did you do that?
Yeah, well, right as COVID was kind of coming into our purview, we had a jog on the calendar and we were debating, do we cancel this in-person Journey of Generosity or do we keep going? And we bought some hand sanitizer and we ran with it, not really knowing where we were headed as a nation. And when we got done, it had been so good. Again, I called Todd and said, how do we do another one? How can we keep going? Can we do it online and see if it would be horrible? And so a couple weeks later, we got one on the schedule. We hosted our first one a few weeks after that, and it was amazing. Honestly, to see people that we could never get to a jog in person because of time zones and distance that were in the room. And then the conversation was as good in so many ways as an in-person journey of generosity that we just got addicted. And the more people that came, they would say, I want to host one. And then I'd say, what date? And we just did it over and over.
I love that. And it was a huge transition to go from an overnight retreat to, maybe 6 hours online, but you were able to see so many people come into the experience by doing it that way. So I have to ask you, after doing 50 some jogs this past year with you and your friends, a story. What's one of your favorite stories that have come out of that time?
Well, like I said, all time zones around the world. One of my favorite jogs had folks from the U.S., but also some folks from North Africa and the Middle East. And we were playing a pretty traditional jog with the same stories from the U.S. for this group. And business owners from Palestine, business owners from Morocco. And day 2, I pushed play on the Barnhart story, which is one of my absolute favorites. And I was a little nervous, though. It's another American family. How is this going to play out? And we got done, and I said, what stood out to you? And the conversation exploded in the best way. The guy said, one of the guys from Morocco that owned a business said, this was my favorite story yet. We should totally have a movie made of this story. And the conversation was so amazing. And by the end of it, I said, hey, I want to confess something. I was actually a little nervous to play that story. And another Western family. And he said, are you kidding me? He said, I want to tell you something, Adam. You don't own this message. This isn't American. This isn't a Western message. This is biblical conversation about generosity. And it's not American culture. It's kingdom culture. And to hear that perspective changed my heart a little bit in that moment. And we watched that conversation play out in a really fun way.
That's so powerful. You're right. This is who we are as children of God. And we're discovering who we are as our stories are unfolding, the ways we get to simply reflect his kingdom to a hurting world. If something you've heard from Adam's story sparks interest in your heart and you'd love to learn more about our journey of generosity, you can simply text the word JOG to the number on your screen to get more information.
Well, our next guest really doesn't need much of an introduction. It is estimated that nearly 20 to 30 million people across the world sing one of Chris Tomlin's songs every week in church services in nearly every language. Time magazine heralded him as one of the most often sung artists in the world. His music has inspired and uplifted entire generations of believers, but above all the accolades, it's his family that he would tell you matters most to him. He and his wife, Lauren, are dear friends of generous giving, and tonight they're with us as our second keynote of the evening, sharing a bit of their personal journey of generosity.
So tell us about you two, how you met. We got to hear the story about how you met, how this all began. And if it's a different story, we got to hear both sides of it.
No, there's only one story, and it's a really good story.
Yeah.
We got set up by a dear friend in Atlanta. Chris had just moved to Atlanta to plant a church. And so we went on a date with him and his girlfriend, and it was such a fun restaurant in Atlanta, JCT. And we were sitting there, and basically the entire time Chris talked to the other couple and didn't even look at me the whole night.
That's intimidating.
Major game.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I was definitely off my game that night, but hey, we're here.
We're here.
You made it.
Project Chris Tomlin, Scene 1, Take 1. Mark?
God was slowly moving in our family, even though we weren't even realizing it. He was starting to bring different situations to us that was awakening our desire to make an impact in the lives of children. And I distinctly remember we were living in Florida at the time, and we decided to give away our piano because we were moving. And I was a day away from giving birth to Madison, our second child, and we were just catching up over dinner, and he just started sharing about how he had taken this piano to a local children's shelter where all of these children didn't have parents. They didn't have a home. And here I am with child, expectant, excited to love on this new baby. And I just remember tears pouring down my face at this restaurant, and everyone's looking at us like, are they in a fight? What's going on? And I was just so moved. All these situations started coming to us where God was awakening our desire to have an impact. Why don't you take it over? Your idea for how we could rally in Nashville to build awareness.
Yeah, so it was coming at every turn. It was coming at me from every different turn. I found out about this children's home, and we were so moved by that, and just being impacted. So I'm just like, okay, what's going on? I get to this thing called Good Friday, Nashville, that I do every year in Nashville, and I started thinking about how do we build this event. I remember telling Lauren, I was like, you know what? I think if we're going to do this for the city every year, I think we should give everything away. Whatever comes in, we should just give it away. Now, Nashville is not the easiest place to play music. There's a concert every night.
Multiple.
There's like 2 or 3 concerts every night,
that.
And massive artists every night. So selling tickets in Nashville it sounds like it'd be easy. It's actually hard because
hard.
It's just concert after concert. So my team said, well, if we're going to do Good Friday Nashville, let's do Bridgestone Arena. It's the biggest arena in the city. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, we won't have enough to even sit on the floor. I mean, this is going to be so embarrassing. And I just didn't have big dreams at this point what it's going to be. By the time the night happens, it becomes the largest Christian event ever in the city of Nashville.
Right.
The most people ever come to
4,000
anything.
to, could you say how many number?
It was like 16, 17,000 people in this arena. The biggest concert there that they've had. It was an amazing moment to say, you know what, isn't it amazing when you decide to give it away? When you decide to give everything away, look what God does. Because I know the year before I played here and 4,000 people came. I didn't do anything different. I'm not different. No, I didn't say we were giving it away. I didn't even tell people that that ticket they bought is going to be given away to kids. We just did, and God just blew the doors open. So I started thinking, how do I take this and become more than just one night in Nashville? What would it look like to take this around the nation to help kids right in our backyard wherever we were?
So we have life going on, and we're now meeting with donors, we're casting vision. It's like, hey, we really want to raise awareness because we believe that local church is the answer for really helping the least of these, for catching the vision and then going out and fostering or adopting these children. So fast forward, we are 4 days away from tour. The tour is booked, all the venues are booked, all the trucks, all the production, meaning $sign, and it's all on us. And we meet with our business manager, and he's like, well, we don't have any money for the tour. All of the money that the donors have given have been for the fall. And I look at Chris across the table, and he goes completely white, right? So we get in the car, separate cars, and I literally remember turning on the ignition, filled with just dread, and hearing God say, the check's written. The check is written. And so I called Chris and I was like, hey, I just had this sense, I just felt like God told me that the check's written. And he's like, well, I don't know what we're going to do because we're in the red right now. And so literally, it's probably a story I will never forget because literally 2 to 3 days later, we had a donor step up literally at the 11th hour, and they gave a gift of $500,000. The whole tour was covered, all the expenses. It was literally 2 days out from tour, and the check was wired on the first day of the tour. And it was one of those things that I will always remember because we really stepped out in risk. We really were following those quiet whispers. We were really stepping out and risking everything that we were and saying, God, we'll go where you're leading. And I'll never forget it, because not only was it for the children, but it was what it did in our hearts. He affirmed who he was to us, and also he did a heart surgery on us, I think, in the process.
I didn't know this for a long time. I grew up in the church. I didn't know this. Do you know that Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven and hell? When Jesus talked about it, he said basically it's one of two things. It's God or money. And okay, he made it very simple. And so he knew how powerful money was. A good step is saying, okay, how much does money have a hold of my life? How much does this have how much do I need to keep letting go?
I think generosity is an adventure. It's an invitation. It's not a should. It's not an obligation, but it's an opportunity. It is such an adventure of partnering with God, with the larger story, how the kingdom is unfolding. It is advancing, and this is a chance to raise your hand and say, I'm all yours. We're here. What do you have for us? And when you show up that way, it is unbelievable how God comes through and makes it very clear the path before you.
So one of the themes that I had, one of the ideas I've had that I wanted to write about is this idea of be the moon. So what's amazing about the moon is it has no light on its own. It emits no light. Yet, when it's in the right place, it reflects a greater light. And you see it light up the dark. We have no light on our own, but we just reflect a greater light, the light of Jesus to the world. Jesus said, "You're the light of the world." That light comes from him. And some days, and I love how the moon is, some days it's a sliver, some days it's barely there, some days it's cloudy, some days it's a full moon. Some days you can fully see it, some days it's like, I'm not sure the moon's there. There's probably a light going. Some days are hard days, some days are cloudy days. But there's always a light coming from a greater source. And I think that's a beautiful picture of all of us. So when you're listening tonight, when you're thinking about your life and how you live, I would just simply say, be the moon.
I'm just a reflection of the love that I've been given. Everybody wants to be somebody. I want to be somebody too. If I'm gonna be known for something, I want to be known for you. I want to be the moon.
When I think about word generosity, it takes me to this quote that was from one of the martyrs of the faith, and his name was Jim Elliot. In his book, in his little journal that was found, I love this quote. It just says, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." That was what was written in his journal. Generosity is not about not about the kind of check you can write. It's the sacrifice of the heart. It's the sacrifice, not the check. What does that mean to you?
I wanna be somebody too. If I'm gonna be known for something, I wanna be known for you. I wanna be the moon up among the stars, fly around the world and lighten up the darkest night. I wanna be the moon.
So to think what we would have missed. We would have missed so much for our own hearts, for our family, and for all those impacted if we hadn't stepped out and risked.
I'm nothing without the sun's amazing grace on everything I do. If you're shining on me, I'm shining right back for you.
When you step out in those risky places, when you step out in irrational ways, it exposes what you prize. It exposes how we resort to our own control, our own means. And God's like, no, I want to show you who I am.
Wow, that song is incredible.
Love it.
What a beautiful picture of a life lived on mission to reflect our God. Thank you, Chris and Lauren, for your time and for your powerful story.
Yeah, our next guest speaker works right alongside our first keynote from tonight, Pastor Craig Groeschel. Bobby Greenwald is a pastor and innovation leader at Life.Church.
Wait, innovation leader? I mean, I want that job title.
I've been trying to get it, but nobody will give it to me.
Maybe we can make that happen. But perhaps more notably, he is the founder of this little app called YouVersion.
Yeah, it's anything but small. You may remember hearing a bit about the story earlier in the broadcast about YouVersion, but you're about to hear even more, specifically the enormous reach of this app, the magnitude of its impact. It's indescribable, and it wouldn't have been possible without an irrational act of generosity.
Hi, I'm Bobby Grunwald, and I'm a pastor at Life Church, and I serve with Pastor Craig Groeschel, and I'm also the founder of the YouVersion Bible app. And it's so good to be with you here today, talking about one of my favorite topics, generosity. You heard Pastor Craig share about our journey as a church through generosity. We were asking, what else could we do? Could we create things that the church needs, not just give our things we've already created, but create new things that the church, the capital C church would need that could help us. And I began to ask, I wonder if there's a way that we could use technology or create something that would help us engage with Scripture more effectively. And we created what's now called the YouVersion Bible app. And it was just an idea. It was a bit of an experiment to see. And we happened to be able to create this Bible app and put it in the App Store on the very first day that the App Store opened in July of 2008. We were one of only 200 free apps at the time. And it was just a simple, free Bible app that was available. And we just had no idea what to expect, though. That very first weekend that the App Store launched, we saw over 83,000 people install this app on their phone. And not only that, they were using it, opening it multiple times a day. And it just blew our minds that God could so quickly use this tool to engage so many people with Scripture. Well, at that point in time, even though we'd seen God do something what we viewed as miraculous, we didn't realize we were going to be at the beginning of something even greater. And so as time went on, we began to share this journey and begin to put more and more of our resources into this and said, what else how can we make this go faster? How can we accelerate it? God began to inspire others to come alongside of us financially and help accelerate it. And then we saw a coalition of partners develop over the last 12 years with thousands of partners now that provide Bible translations in many different languages, that are volunteering their time to provide tech support, are creating devotional content. We have thousands of daily devotionals and authors and publishers and pastors and just all sorts of different people that God's brought to contribute resources to what is a completely free, non-commercial tool. And we've seen those 83,000 people, devices that initially installed it, now grow to over 475 million devices, with over 5 million new devices every month that are installing the Bible app. And it's in every corner of the earth, every single country and territory, including countries where it's prohibited to have a physical Bible. You can download the YouVersion Bible app. And we've seen almost 1,600 languages now that we have the Bible text available in. It would be impossible for us to do that alone. It's not something we could have ever dreamed that God was going to do. We certainly didn't know they would, but it was one step of obedience, one step of faith in our generosity as a church, and a commitment to want this to be a tool that we give away that then inspired, at first 1, 2, 10, 100, and now thousands of people to come alongside of us and be a part of it. And so I want you to hear that, because I think it's such a key thing to recognize that generosity not only is a blessing to us and not only is something that we get to personally experience God's faithfulness with, but it's contagious.
Well, it is truly remarkable, Adana, what a small act of generosity can do. You have no idea where it's going to lead and where it's going to take you.
Nick, that is so true. 5 years ago, Generous Giving had a really special opportunity to meet a young couple with big dreams. We have journeyed together since and are excited to share an update of how their story continues to unfold.
Their story illustrates a powerful principle of answering the question, how much is enough? Let's watch and see the impact this has had on their lives.
The attitude toward money that Allison and I think, brought into our time at school was what we now call a spender mindset. That is, were we to receive additional money, our first thought is how we would use it to do something fun. Allison and I really enjoy travel. We enjoy nice food. Before I started graduate school, I was earning a high income in the private equity industry, and we were spending $1,000 a month dining out at Boston's finest restaurants. We were taking 5-star international vacations to Asia and Europe and other locations, and had a blast doing it.
I just felt comfortable, and so that's where I kind of fell into. I fell into a place where I just spent without thinking about it, but I did recognize that we were living in a way that was more than what a lot of people lived.
John and I met in a men's Bible study that kicked off this first semester of Harvard Business School. So one day, he calls me out of the blue and says, "Greg, I have the perfect class for you to take, and it's called God and Money." And I thought to myself, well, I love God and I love money. Sounds pretty natural. The final term paper for the course was to write a paper on any subject related to God and money. So John and I decided to write a paper on how we would think about managing wealth were we ever to be blessed with more than we needed one day. I think over the course of that semester, we had identified the fact that both of us probably had a pretty bad theology of money coming into the class, me as a spender and John as a saver. And so we wanted to understand God's true teaching on the subject. I joined a healthcare startup just in Nashville, Tennessee upon graduating, and we were acquired by a much larger healthcare company. And I had a share of equity in the startup, and so I received a huge payout to the tune of around $450,000 just 6 weeks into my new job. My first thought was, I see what you're doing here, God. You're testing whether what I am saying I learned about your word and about your vision for my wealth, did I really learn it? Will I really faithfully live that out? And so it was an exciting process for Allison and me to work through how to be faithful with this tremendous, unexpected blessing.
I think what was exciting when he received that income was my initial thought wasn't, oh, how are we gonna spend this, And I think that was different than maybe what it would have been before. Instead, it was like, we're gonna have a chance to really give in a way that actually really might impact others. And this really made it come to life and feel like, wow, we can give a substantial amount to something that we're passionate about and really see God use that money in a really neat way. Over the last 5 years, our family has seen a lot of exciting things happen. We now have 3 children instead of 2. So we have Grant, who is 7, Leah, who is almost 5, and Marshall joined our family through adoption in 2018, and he's 2.5.
From a career perspective, we've been fortunate that our business has continued to grow. We're now up toward 3,000 employees. 5 years ago, we were probably at 200, 300 employees. So we've been blessed to see extraordinary growth in the business.
Over the last 12 years of our marriage, God has just really transformed our hearts to really ignite this love of generosity. It's just been so much fun to see how God has been putting desires on our heart to serve others more freely. He has allowed us to feel a contentment with the things that we have, so we're no longer striving to have more for ourselves, but really loving this idea of how to serve others.
5 years ago, when we really started this journey, it was largely theoretical. We had been sitting in our ivory tower in Cambridge, Massachusetts, writing about what we would one day do with money that we did not yet have. And over the past 5 years, we've learned that it's much different to put it into practice. God was leading us to create a framework on how much we would spend, save, and give if He ever blessed us with more than we needed. And we have experienced now through the journey that God has had us on that having those boundaries in place actually provides us great freedom, because instead of facing temptation or struggling and debating through how to handle a certain economic decision, we have those guidelines in place. God has continued to bless the business over the past 5 years since that time. So in 2018, we spun out to a private equity firm, and that created a liquidity event that was around 5 times the size of the initial one. So this was another opportunity, and in some ways a test to say, like, are we really embracing these values that we espouse? Will we choose to be obedient? Then in May of 2020, so about a year ago, we had another sale of the company, which was then 5 times larger again than the prior one. And so here, we're talking about a magnitude far beyond what we ever would have expected or anticipated. The attitude that we have with that first is one of gratitude and thankfulness to God for provision far beyond what we deserve or expect. And 2, it is just this continued walk with the Lord of how can we be obedient as He elects to bless us financially. I now understand that the point of generosity is not so much the giving in and of itself, because our God is sovereign and He doesn't need our money, but rather it is an opportunity for us to become more like Him and to grow closer to Him. And ultimately, that is what matters with respect to kingdom work.
Few ways in which our giving has really, I think, just excited us the most is through our church. We've been able to support their ministry of fostering and adoption care. And it's been really neat for us to come alongside the church and offer the opportunity for others who might not be in the position to financially cover the cost of an adoption, and we've been able to help them along the way. I think we've helped support 14, 15 adoptions in our church, and that has been really a fun and exciting thing to hear the stories and see the pictures of these babies coming home to their forever homes. Has been really exciting.
When I have the opportunity to talk about generosity with someone who's younger than me, one piece of advice that I often like to share is the benefit of choosing to live this way now, even before we potentially have had the chance to accumulate very much wealth, because I think it is so hard to unwind a more complex lifestyle later in life. Putting these boundaries in place now allows us to enjoy the freedom that God offers now without having to wait.
It's been super encouraging to see the stories that Generous Giving has shared with the world, truly. And every time we see a new video that pops up of a family choosing to be generous with the way that they live, just really encourages us and allows us to strive to continue to live this out.
Wow, what a remarkable evening.
Yes, and that concludes our broadcast tonight, but it's not over yet. Tonight, we wanted to really create a broadcast that would lead to a conversation.
That is the heart of generous giving.
And so if you're with a group tonight, our hope is that you'll carry this conversation from the broadcast into your own homes.
Yes, don't let the night end here. We've created a few questions to consider, either together with those you're watching with, or perhaps even on your own.
Yeah, at the end of the broadcast here in a moment, we're going to share some questions on your screen. Use these to create conversation on your own, take a picture of them, or maybe make up some of your own questions.
Then enjoy some meaningful conversations with those you're watching with tonight, because you never know where one conversation might lead.
And if tonight's broadcast moved you at all and you want to learn more about generous giving and become connected to this vibrant group of Jesus followers, don't hesitate to text generosity to the number on your screen. We're not going to ask you for anything. We actually love to just give to you.
That's so true.
Right? We'll send you an email and offer you a few ways for you to connect with us.
Now, don't forget, this broadcast and all of its content will be on demand tomorrow on our website at generousgiving.org.
If you remember anything tonight, we want you to walk away believing every single one of us has the ability to live an irrationally generous life, knowing that it is truly more blessed to give than to receive.
We've enjoyed this evening with you, and we hope you'll continue to enjoy it together.
And we hope to see you in Orlando in 2022. Good night, everyone.
And thank you for watching.